The transport vessel's hull groaned as it descended through New Terra's atmosphere. Its passengers pressed against viewports to catch their first glimpse of what would be their new home. Among them, Zena Voss maintained the carefully crafted expression of weary hope that she'd practiced for months. Her auburn hair hung in loose waves around a face that bore the right mix of determination and vulnerability, the perfect refugee, fleeing the war-torn outer systems. If only they knew what she really was. The refugee processing center buzzed with activity as colonists were assigned temporary housing and integration schedules. Zena clutched her forged identification papers, reviewing her fabricated backstory one final time. Parents lost in the Kepler raids, no surviving family, skills in hydroponics and atmospheric processing. The Nexari Intelligence Division had crafted her identity meticulously, down to the slight calluses on her hands that suggested years of agricultural work. Nex called a harried clerk behind a metal desk. Zena stepped forward, offering her papers with hands that trembled just enough to seem authentic. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, scanned the documents before looking up with a sympathetic smile. "Another Kepler survivor," she murmured. "I'm so sorry for your losses, dear. We'll get you settled properly." She stamped the papers with practiced efficiency. "You'll be assigned to Residential Block C7. Marcus Thorne will be your integration coordinator. He's one of our best engineers, and he has experience helping refugees adjust to colony life." An hour later, Zena found herself standing before a modest prefabricated housing unit, her single bag of possessions feeling heavier than it should. The colony sprawled around her in organized efficiency. Solar collectors glinted on rooftops. Hydroponic gardens created green oases between buildings, and the distant hum of atmospheric processors provided a constant backdrop of mechanical comfort. "You must be Zena." She turned to find a man approaching, his work clothes dusty and his tool belt suggesting he'd come straight from some maintenance task. He was tall, with sandy brown hair and blue eyes that held a warmth she hadn't expected. Most humans she'd encountered during her training were either fearful or hostile when discussing the outer colonies. This one seemed genuinely pleased to meet her. "Marcus Thorne," he said, extending his hand. "Welcome to New Terra." His grip was firm but not aggressive, and Zena was struck by the complete absence of suspicion in his demeanor. Her people had spent so long viewing humans as paranoid and militaristic that encountering such open friendliness felt disarming. "Thank you," she replied, allowing just a hint of her fabricated Kepler accent to color her words. "I wasn't sure what to expect. Well, we're not perfect here, but we try to take care of each other," Marcus said, gesturing toward the housing unit. "Let's get you settled in, and then I'll show you round. The integration process can be overwhelming at first, but you'll find your footing." As he led her through the small but efficiently designed living space, Zena found herself genuinely impressed by the colony's thoughtful construction. Everything had been built with long-term sustainability in mind, from the water reclamation systems to the modular design that allowed for easy expansion. The previous tenant left some basic furnishings, Marcus explained, indicating a simple but comfortable bed, desk, and chairs. "Community services will provide you with a starter pack of essentials, and once you're assigned work detail, you'll earn credits for additional items." "Work detail?" Zena asked, though she knew the answer from her briefings. "Everyone contributes according to their abilities," Marcus replied. "Your file says you have hydroponics experience, which is fantastic. We're always looking to expand our food production, but we can also use help with atmospheric monitoring, if that interests you." Perfect. Atmospheric monitoring would give her access to the colony's environmental systems, potentially revealing defensive capabilities and vulnerabilities. "I'd like to learn about both," she said carefully. "I want to be useful here." Something in Marcus's expression softened. "You know, a lot of refugees arrive feeling like they need to prove themselves immediately. You don't have to earn your place here, Zena. You're already part of our community." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. In all her training scenarios, humans had been portrayed as calculating, always looking for advantage. The idea that they might simply welcome someone out of genuine compassion hadn't been part of her preparation. Over the following days, Marcus proved to be an excellent guide. He introduced her to other colonists, helped her navigate the work, assignment process, and even invited her to join the weekly community gatherings where residents shared meals and discussed colony business. Xena found herself drawn into conversations about crop yields, weather patterns, and the small dramas of daily life. You're fitting in well, Marcus observed one evening as they walked through the colony's central plaza. The twin moons were rising, casting silver light over the settlement's modest buildings. I've seen refugees struggle for months to find their place, but you seem to have a natural feel for community life. If only he knew the truth. Xena's enhanced senses were constantly analyzing everything around her: the placement of security cameras, the patrol patterns of the small security force, the locations of power distribution hubs. Every friendly conversation was an opportunity to gather intelligence. Every shared meal a chance to identify potential weaknesses. Yet increasingly, she found herself actually enjoying these interactions. The humans' capacity for simple kindness, their willingness to share resources with strangers, their genuine concern for each other's well-being. It was also different from what she'd been taught about their species. Marcus, she said impulsively, why did you volunteer to help with refugee integration? He was quiet for a moment, his hands clasped behind his back as they walked. I suppose because I know what it's like to lose everything and have to start over, he finally said. New Terra was my second chance. I wanted to help others find theirs. There was pain in his voice, carefully controlled but unmistakable. Xena's training told her to probe deeper, to identify this emotional vulnerability and exploit it. Instead, she found herself simply walking beside him in companionable silence, respecting his privacy. 3 weeks into her assignment, Xena realized she was developing feelings that had no place in her mission. When Marcus smiled at her across the hydroponics bay where they worked together, her heart rate increased in ways that had nothing to do with stress or deception. When he brought her coffee during long atmospheric monitoring shifts, she found herself treasuring the small gesture of care. The nightly reports she sent to her handlers via encrypted transmission grew increasingly vague. She provided basic information about colony defenses and population, but found herself omitting details that might make New Terra vulnerable to attack. When pressed for more specific intelligence, she claimed she needed more time to gain deeper access. It was during a particularly beautiful sunset, as she and Marcus stood on the colony's observation deck, watching the sky turn brilliant shades of orange and purple, that she truly understood the depth of her predicament. Beautiful, isn't it? Marcus said softly. Sometimes I can't believe we get to call this place home. Xena looked at his profile, lit by the dying light, and felt her carefully constructed identity cracking. She was falling in love with him, with his gentleness, his integrity, his genuine care for others. More than that, she was falling in love with the life he'd shown her, with the possibility of belonging somewhere without deception. Yes, she whispered, though she wasn't looking at the sunset anymore. It's beautiful. That night, alone in her quarters, Xena stared at her reflection in the small mirror. With concentration, she could shift her features, reveal her true Nexari appearance with its distinctive silver-flecked skin and violet eyes. The face that looked back at her was that of a spy, an infiltrator, someone whose very presence endangered everyone she'd come to care about. But when she relaxed, allowing her human disguise to reassert itself, she saw something else, a woman who'd found a home, a community, and possibly love in the most unlikely of places. The question that haunted her as she lay awake was simple yet impossible. Who was she really becoming? Marcus Thorne stood in the depths of New Terra's engineering complex, his hands steady despite the tremor in his heart. The atmospheric processor hummed around him, its rhythmic pulse of familiar comfort that had sustained him through countless sleepless nights over the past 5 years. But tonight, even its mechanical certainty couldn't calm the storm of emotions that Xena had awakened in him. He'd sworn he would never feel this way again. The holographic display before him showed atmospheric readings, but his mind kept drifting to the way Xena's eyes lit up when she laughed, the gentle way she tended to the hydroponic plants, the quiet strength she'd shown in adapting to colony life. In 6 months, she'd become more than just another refugee he was helping. She'd become the center of his carefully rebuilt world. Working late again, Marcus turned to find Thomas Brennan, the colony's security chief, descending the maintenance ladder. Thomas was one of the few people who knew the full story of Marcus's past, and his expression carried the weight of old concerns. Just running diagnostics, Marcus replied, gesturing at the displays. The new atmospheric scrubbers are performing better than expected. Thomas nodded, but his gaze was searching. And how's our newest resident settling in? The question wasn't casual, and Marcus knew it. Thomas had been suspicious of refugees ever since the Proxima incident 2 years ago, when a sleeper agent had nearly sabotaged an entire agricultural station. It was a reasonable caution, but it chafed against Marcus's belief in second chances. Xena's been exemplary, Marcus said firmly. She's integrated better than most long-term residents. The hydroponics yields have improved 20% since she started working there. I'm sure they have, Thomas replied carefully. I'm just saying we should be cautious. You know better than anyone what happens when we let our guard down. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow, bringing back memories he'd spent years trying to bury. His wife Rachel, their daughter Emma, the small research outpost on Kepler Prime where they'd been building a new life. The Nexari raiders had come without warning, their shape-shifting abilities allowing them to infiltrate and destroy before anyone realized the danger. He'd been off-world when it happened, attending a terraforming conference. By the time he returned, there was nothing left but ash and silence. That's not fair, Thomas, Marcus said quietly. Xena isn't responsible for what happened to my family. I'm not saying she is, Thomas replied, his tone gentling. I'm just asking you to be careful. I've seen how you look at her, and I understand why. She's everything Rachel was: kind, intelligent, passionate about making things grow. But that's exactly why you need to be objective. Marcus turned back to the atmospheric displays, unable to meet his friend's eyes. You think I'm replacing Rachel? I think you're a good man who deserves happiness, Thomas said. But I also think you're vulnerable in ways you don't want to admit. Just take things slowly. Let us complete the background verification before you get into deep. After Thomas left, Marcus stood alone with his thoughts and the steady hum of machinery. The security chief wasn't wrong. There were similarities between Xena and Rachel that went beyond the obvious. Both had possessed an intuitive understanding of complex systems, whether biological or mechanical. Both had a way of making everyone around them feel valued and heard. Both had seen potential in him that he'd never recognized in himself. But Xena was also different in ways that surprised him. Where Rachel had been impulsive and spontaneous, Xena was thoughtful and measured. Where Rachel had been an open book, Xena carried depths that intrigued him. Sometimes he caught her looking at the stars, with an expression of such profound longing that it made his chest ache. The following week, Marcus found himself working alongside Xena in the colony's atmospheric monitoring station. She'd taken to the technical work with surprising ease, her questions showing an understanding of complex systems that went beyond basic training. The oxygen levels in Sector 7 are fluctuating, she observed, studying the readouts with focused intensity. It's subtle, but there's a pattern that suggests a micro-leak in the distribution network. Marcus leaned over her shoulder to examine the data, acutely aware of her presence. She smelled like the hydroponics, bay earth, and growing things, and something uniquely her own. You're right, he said, impressed despite himself. Most people wouldn't have caught that. You have excellent analytical skills. A shadow crossed her face so quickly he almost missed it. I've always been good at seeing patterns, she said quietly. Sometimes I wish I wasn't. There was pain in her voice, carefully controlled but unmistakable. Marcus recognized it, the weight of knowledge that couldn't be shared, experiences that couldn't be explained. He'd carried similar burdens since Kepler Prime. Do you want to talk about it? He asked gently. Xena was quiet for a long moment, her fingers dancing over the control interface with practiced ease. My family, she finally said. We were separatists on Kepler Prime. We believed the outer colonies should govern themselves, not be subject to distant bureaucrats who'd never set foot on a frontier world. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Kepler Prime, the same world where his family had died, where Nexari raiders had struck under cover of local political unrest. "The raids," he whispered. "The raids," she confirmed, her voice hollow. "My parents were killed in the crossfire between colonial security and the attackers. I was off-world, working on a supply ship. When I came back," she gestured helplessly. "You know the rest." Marcus stared at her, pieces of an impossible puzzle falling into place. They'd both lost everything on the same world, possibly in the same attack. The irony was devastating to survivors finding each other across the void, drawn together by shared trauma they'd never fully discussed. "I'm sorry," he said, the words inadequate but necessary. "I lost people there too." Xena turned to look at him, and in her eyes he saw the same mixture of grief and guilt that he carried. "Who? My wife and daughter," Marcus replied. "Rachel and Emma. They were part of a terraforming research team." For a moment, they simply looked at each other, to people who understood loss in ways that couldn't be explained to others. Then, Xena reached out and took his hand, her touch warm and real and grounding. "I'm sorry too," she whispered. The moment stretched between them, heavy with shared understanding and growing connection. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a wall he'd built around his heart beginning to crack. He'd thought he would never feel this way again, never want to risk the vulnerability that came with loving someone. But Xena made him want to try. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened beyond professional collaboration. They began sharing meals, taking walks through the colony's growing districts, spending quiet evenings on the observation deck watching the stars. Marcus found himself telling her things he'd never shared with anyone. His dreams of building perfect atmospheric systems, his fear of failing to protect the people who depended on him, his complicated relationship with Hope. Xena listened with an intensity that was both flattering and slightly unnerving. Sometimes he caught her watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, as if she were memorizing every word, every gesture. When he asked about it, she would smile and say she was simply grateful to have found someone who understood. It was during one of these conversations, as they sat in the hydroponics bay surrounded by the lush green of growing plants, that Marcus realized he was falling in love with her, not as a replacement for Rachel, but as someone entirely new, someone who challenged him, comforted him, and made him believe in possibilities he'd given up on. "Xena," he said suddenly, interrupting her explanation of nutrient cycling systems, "I need to tell you something." She looked up from the tomato plant she'd been examining, her face open and attentive. "I haven't felt this way about anyone since Rachel died," he continued, his heart hammering. "I wasn't sure I could feel this way again. But with you," he took a deep breath, "I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, and Marcus watched as a complex parade of emotions crossed Xena's face: surprise, joy, fear, and something that might have been pain. "Marcus," she said softly, reaching out to touch his cheek, "I feel the same way, but there are things about me, about my past, that you don't know. Things that might change how you feel." "Everyone has secrets," Marcus replied, covering her hand with his own. "Everyone has parts of their past they'd rather not share. It doesn't matter to me." Xena's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment she looked utterly lost. "You say that now." But Marcus silenced her with a gentle kiss, pouring all his hope and affection into the connection. When they parted, both were breathing hard. "Whatever it is," he said firmly, "we'll face it together. I've spent 5 years running from the possibility of loving someone again. I don't want to run anymore." That night, Xena came to his quarters, and they made love with a desperate intensity that spoke of people who'd found something precious and were terrified of losing it. Afterward, as she lay in his arms, Marcus felt a peace he hadn't known since before Kepler Prime. "I love you," Xena whispered against his chest, her voice thick with emotion. "More than you know. More than I ever thought possible." "I love you too," Marcus replied, pressing. Jira Kane materialized from the transport pod at the edge of New Terra's sensor grid, her form shifting from the crystalline appearance of her true Nexari heritage to the unremarkable human female she would need to be for this extraction mission. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was using the same infiltration techniques that had made her childhood friend one of their most valuable assets. If Xena was still an asset at all, 3 months of increasingly vague reports had triggered alarm bells throughout Nexari. Intelligence. Xena Voss, who had never failed a mission, who had successfully infiltrated and compromised 7 human installations, had suddenly become evasive about her progress on New Terra. Her handlers suspected emotional compromise, but the truth was likely worse than they imagined. Jira had known Xena since they were younglings in the state Krishes, training together in the arts of infiltration and manipulation. They'd been more than partners, they'd been sisters in all. But blood, understanding each other with the intuitive connection that only shared trauma could create. That's why the Council had chosen Jira for this mission. If anyone could reach Xena, could bring her back from whatever human deception had ensnared her, it would be her oldest friend. But as Jira made her way through New Terra's bustling central district, observing the easy interaction between residents, the obvious prosperity and contentment of the colony, she began to understand why Xena might have been affected. These humans weren't the paranoid, militaristic monsters their propaganda portrayed. They seemed genuinely welcoming, building something sustainable and beautiful in this corner of space. It made her mission more complicated, but not impossible. Following Xena's encrypted location markers, Jira found herself outside a modest residential block as the colony's artificial evening cycle began. Through enhanced senses, she could detect heartbeats inside Unit C7, one unmistakably Nexari despite its human disguise. The other was strong, steady, male, presumably the target Xena was supposed to be manipulating. What Jira hadn't expected was the complex biochemical signature surrounding both figures: oxytocin, dopamine, elevated serotonin levels, all the markers of genuine romantic attachment. But underneath Xena's signature was something else, something that made Jira's breath catch in shock: pregnancy hormones. But not just any pregnancy, the unique biochemical cocktail that occurred only when a Nexari conceived with a true emotional bond, which should have been impossible with a human. Jira waited until the male signature moved away before approaching the door. She activated the harmonic frequency that would identify her to Xena without alerting human security systems, then waited as locks disengaged and the door slid open. Jira, Xena's voice was barely a whisper, shock and fear warring in her expression. She looked well healthier than Jira had seen her in years, with a glow to her skin that spoke of contentment, but her eyes held the trapped desperation of someone whose 2 worlds were about to collide catastrophically. "Hello, sister mine," Jira said softly, using their childhood endearment. "We need to talk." Once inside, Jira allowed her human disguise to fade, revealing her true appearance. Xena did the same, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, 2 Nexari women whose lives had taken drastically different paths. "You're pregnant," Jira said without preamble, "with a human child." Xena's hand moved instinctively to her still flat abdomen. "How did you?" "Biochemical analysis. It's impossible to miss once you know what to look for." Jira studied her friend's face carefully. "The question is how it's possible at all. Our species are genetically incompatible unless the Nexari forms a true emotional bond." Xena finished quietly. "I know. Which means you've actually fallen in love with your target." Jira's voice carried amazement rather than accusation. "Xena, do you understand what this means? You're carrying the first documented human Nexari hybrid. The biological implications alone—" "I understand the implications," Xena interrupted, her skin flickering with patterns of distress. "I understand that I've failed my mission, compromised my cover, and potentially endangered both our species' security protocols. I understand that the Council will view this as the ultimate betrayal." Jira reached out and took her friend's hands. "Tell me about him." For the next hour, Xena spoke about Marcus with a passion that was painful to witness. She described his kindness, his intelligence, his capacity for forgiveness and growth. She talked about the colony he'd helped build, the refugees he'd integrated, the way he'd shown her what it meant to belong somewhere without deception. "He lost his family on Kepler Prime," Xena said, her voice breaking, "in the same raids where I supposedly lost mine. We're bound together by tragedy that I helped cause, and he doesn't even know it." "You didn't cause those raids," Jira said firmly. "You were following orders, completing a mission. The casualties were an unfortunate necessity." Xena looked at her with eyes full of pain. "Is that what we tell ourselves? That the families we destroy are just unfortunate necessities? Jira felt a chill of recognition. This wasn't just romantic compromise. Xena was questioning the fundamental principles of their society, their purpose, their right to expand at humanity's expense. Xena, you're not thinking clearly, Jira said carefully. The pregnancy hormones, the emotional attachment, they're affecting your judgment. This human has manipulated you, no. Xena said sharply, her skin flaring with defensive patterns. Marcus doesn't even know what I am. If anyone's been manipulated, it's him. I came here to destroy everything he's built, to betray everyone who's shown me kindness. And instead, she gestured helplessly, instead I found a home. The word hung between them heavy with implications. Home, not an assignment, not a cover identity, but a genuine sense of belonging that Xena had never found among their own people. What do you want me to tell the council? Jira asked quietly. Tell them I need more time, Xena replied. Tell them the target is more resistant than expected, that I'm making progress, but need to maintain deep cover for several more months. And then what? You give birth to a hybrid child and hope no one notices? You spend the rest of your life lying to someone you claim to love. Xena was quiet for a long moment, her hand resting on her abdomen. I don't know, she finally admitted. I just know I can't leave him, not now. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of the door opening. Both women froze as Marcus's voice called out, Xena, I brought dinner from the community kitchen. I thought we could. He appeared in the doorway and stopped abruptly, taking in the scene before him. Two women who looked unmistakably alien despite their human features, their skin flickering with bioluminescent patterns of shock and fear. What? Marcus began. Then his eyes focused on Xena, really seeing her for the first time, without her disguise. The silver-flecked skin, the violet eyes, the subtle structural differences that marked her as something other than human. Marcus. Xena whispered, rising from her chair. I can explain. Nexari. He breathed, his face going pale. You're Nexari. The word hit the room like a physical blow. Jira watched as understanding dawned in the human's eyes, not just that his lover was alien, but that she belonged to the species that had killed his family, destroyed his world, shattered his life. How long? Marcus asked, his voice deadly quiet. 8 months, Xena replied, tears streaming down her face. Since the beginning. Everything was a lie, Marcus said, and Jira could hear his heart breaking in his voice. Our relationship, your feelings, all of it just part of your mission. No, Xena said desperately, stepping toward him. My feelings are real. My love for you is real. Everything else was the lie, my mission, my purpose, my loyalty to a cause that would destroy everything beautiful you've built here. Marcus backed away from her, his expression cycling through betrayal, anger, and devastating hurt. I told you I loved you. I trusted you with everything, my past, my fears, my hopes for the future. And you were spying on us the entire time. Marcus, please, get out, he said quietly. Both of you, get out of my colony, get out of my life, and don't ever come back. You don't understand, Xena said, her skin flashing with desperate patterns. I'm pregnant. With your child. The words stopped Marcus cold. He stared at her, his face cycling through disbelief, shock, and something that might have been wonder before hardening into rejection. Impossible, he said flatly. We're different species, not as different as we thought. Jira interjected, speaking for the first time. The pregnancy is real, and it's viable. Our species can interbreed when certain conditions are met. Marcus looked between them, his scientific mind clearly grappling with the implications even as his emotional world crumbled. What conditions? True emotional attachment, Jira replied. Genuine love, not manipulation or deception. The fact that she conceived means her feelings for you are real. Whatever else might be false. For a moment, hope flickered in Marcus's eyes. Then it died, replaced by cold analysis. Or it means you're both better manipulators than I imagined, he said. Either way, I want you gone. If there really is a child, it'll be better off never knowing its father was fool enough to trust an Nexari spy. He turned and walked away, leaving Xena broken and sobbing in the middle of the room. Jira knelt beside her friend, offering what comfort she could as Alar. 20 years had passed since the night that changed everything, and Kale Thornvoss stood at the edge of the Nexari homeworld's capital city, watching the twin suns set over crystalline spires that had never known the warmth of hybrid footsteps. At 21, he was tall like his father, but moved with the fluid grace of his mother's people, his skin carrying a subtle luminescence that shifted with his emotions, a living testament to the impossible love that had created him. His existence was a secret that had shaped decades of policy, fear, and hidden warfare between species. "You don't have to do this," Jira said from behind him, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd spent 20 years protecting a secret that could destroy worlds. She'd aged in the years since New Terra, silver threading through her dark hair, but her eyes still held the fierce loyalty that had made her choose friendship over duty. "Yes, I do," Kale replied, his voice carrying harmonics that spoke to both human and Nexari nervous systems. "How many more mixed families are hiding in the shadows? How many more children are growing up ashamed of what they are?" The underground network had grown slowly but steadily over the years. Mixed couples who'd found each other despite the barriers. Children born of impossible love. Sympathizers from both species who believed in something better than eternal separation. They called themselves the Confluence, and Kale had become their unwitting symbol simply by existing. "The Council won't listen," Jira warned. "They see you as an abomination, proof that our genetic purity is under threat. Half of them want to study you, the other half want to eliminate you." Kel's skin flickered with patterns of determination mixed with fear. Then maybe it's time they learned what their abomination can do. He possessed abilities that neither species had anticipated. From his mother, he'd inherited the shape-shifting capabilities and enhanced senses of the Nexari. From his father, he'd gained the human capacity for emotional resilience and adaptability. The combination had created something unprecedented, a being who could move between worlds both literally and figuratively, understanding both species in ways that pure bloods could never achieve. The transmission came through just as the suns disappeared behind the horizon, encoded in the quantum frequencies that only hybrid neural networks could decode. Kel's expression shifted. As he processed the information, patterns of excitement and concern racing across his skin. "What is it?" Jira asked, recognizing the signs of incoming intelligence. "The Terran Council." Kale said slowly, "They're planning a preemptive strike against the Nexari breeding worlds. They've discovered the hybrid program and think it's a genetic weapon." The irony was devastating. Both species had developed hybrid programs in secret, trying to create living weapons that could infiltrate and destroy their enemies. Neither had anticipated that the children of these unions would develop their own agenda, one that transcended the hatred of their parents' generations. "When?" Jira asked. 3 days. The attack fleet is already assembled at the Vanguard station." Kel's skin pulsed with urgent patterns. "We have to warn the Council, even if they hate us for it. And the human settlements, the mixed families in hiding?" Kale closed his eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices. "We protect them all. It's time to stop hiding." The next 72 hours moved with the inexorable momentum of avalanche. Kel's network activated across dozens of worlds, hybrid children and their families emerging from hiding to carry warnings to both species. The revelation of their existence sent shockwaves through both governments, but it also bought precious time to prevent a massacre on the Nexari homeworld. The High Council convened an emergency session as Kale stood before them, no longer hiding what he was. His skin displayed the complex patterns of his mixed heritage, the structured beauty of Nexari genetics interwoven with the chaotic vitality of human emotions. "You claim to speak for our enemies," Elder Voss intoned, his ancient voice carrying the weight of centuries, "yet you carry their genetic corruption in your very cells." "I carry both our peoples in my cells," Kale replied, his voice carrying the harmonic frequencies that could speak to Nexari and human minds simultaneously. "And I've seen what neither of you have, the possibility of something greater than either species alone." Around the chamber, other council members flickered with patterns of disgust, fear, and reluctant fascination. They'd never seen a viable hybrid before, had never imagined that such a being could exist, let alone thrive. "The human fleet approaches," Kale continued, 50 ships, armed with genetic weapons designed to sterilize Nexari breeding worlds. They believe we're creating an army of spies and saboteurs. They're wrong, but their fear is real. And why should we trust the word of a genetic aberration? Elder Thane demanded, his skin pulsing with aggressive patterns. Because I've already proven my loyalty, Kale replied, to both species, to the future we could build together. He activated the holographic display, showing the positions of human and Nexari fleets, the locations of hidden hybrid populations, the careful network of relationships that had grown in the shadows. Between worlds, for 20 years, hybrids have been living among you human and Nexari alike. We've prevented 17 potential conflicts, stopped 3 terrorist attacks, and saved countless lives on both sides. We've been the bridge between worlds, trying to build something better than endless war. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Elder Voss leaned forward, his ancient eyes studying Kale with new intensity. You speak of building something better, he said slowly. What exactly are you proposing? Kale's skin shifted to display patterns of hope and determination, integration, not conquest, not subjugation, but genuine cooperation. Joint colonies where both species can live and work together. Shared research programs that benefit everyone. An end to the cycle of fear and retaliation that has cost both our peoples so much. Impossible. Elder Thane dismissed. Our species are too different. Our values, our biology, our entire approach to existence are complementary. Kale interrupted. Nexari precision and human adaptability. Nexari longevity and human innovation. We could be stronger together than either species alone. Before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the chamber. A young aide rushed in, his skin flashing with patterns of urgent distress. Elders, the human fleet has engaged our outer defense perimeter. They're demanding the surrender of all hybrid populations. Kale felt his heart sink. Despite all their efforts, the war was beginning anyway. Round the chamber, council members began flickering with patterns of rage and determination, the ancient reflexes of a warrior species awakening. Wait, Kale said, his voice carrying commanding harmonics that surprised even him. There's another way. He activated his personal communicator, broadcasting on frequencies that would reach every hybrid in the sector. This is Kale Thornvoss, speaking to all Confluence members. It's time to reveal ourselves, all of us, at once. Within minutes, the quantum networks were alive with hybrid voices, broadcasting from dozens of worlds simultaneously. Human colonies discovered that their neighbors, friends, and lovers had been hiding Nexari heritage. Nexari breeding worlds found themselves host to human families they'd never suspected existed. The revelation paralyzed both fleets. How could they fight when the enemy was revealed to be their own children, their own lovers, their own friends? This is what we've built, Kale said to the stunned council chamber. Not weapons, but bridges. Not soldiers, but families. The future doesn't have to be about conquest or fear. It can be about choice. Elder Voss rose slowly, his ancient frame carrying the weight of millennia. And what of loyalty? What of species purity? What of the natural order that has governed our existence since the dawn of consciousness? Kale looked at him with eyes that held both human compassion and Nexari wisdom. What of love? What of growth? What of the possibility that the next stage of evolution isn't about purity, but about synthesis? The question hung in the chamber like a challenge to everything they'd believed. Outside, the fleets remained frozen, unable to fire on worlds that might contain their own children. You're asking us to abandon everything we've fought for, Elder Thane said quietly. I'm asking you to fight for something better, Kale replied. For a future where children don't have to hide what they are, where love isn't limited by species, boundaries, where the choice to reach across the void is celebrated rather than punished. In the silence that followed, Kale felt the weight of history pressing down on him. Two species stood at the edge of transformation, and his words might be the push that sent them toward unity or deeper into war. The decision, when it came, would change everything. The Galactic Council chambers had never hosted such an unprecedented gathering. Representatives from both human and Nexari governments sat in careful formation around the circular assembly. while holographic displays showed the faces of hybrid families broadcasting from dozens of worlds. At the center of it all, three figures sat together for the first time in 20 years: Xena, Marcus, and their son Kale. The reunion had been as painful as it was necessary. 2 decades of separation, betrayal, and carefully maintained distance couldn't be erased by the crisis that had brought them together. But as they faced the assembled representatives of 2 civilizations, their shared purpose was undeniable. "The choice before us is simple," Kale addressed the chamber, his voice carrying the harmonic frequencies that both species could understand. "We can continue the cycle of fear and violence that has defined our relationship for generations, or we can choose something unprecedented: genuine cooperation between species." Admiral Chen of the Terran Defense Force leaned forward, his weathered face skeptical. "You're asking us to trust the same species that has conducted espionage operations against our colonies for decades, the same species that infiltrated our worlds and manipulated our people." His eyes fixed on Xena as he spoke, and she felt the weight of her past actions settling around her like a shroud. Every mission, every manipulation, every family torn apart by the conflict she'd helped orchestrate, all of it had led to this moment. "You're right," Xena said quietly, rising to address the assembly. "I was a spy. I infiltrated human colonies, gathered intelligence, and contributed to operations that cost human lives. I cannot undo that, and I will not ask for forgiveness." The chamber fell silent, both sides listening intently to her words. "But I can offer understanding," she continued, her skin flickering with patterns of remorse and determination. "I know what it's like to live in fear of the other, to see enemies where there might be friends. I know what it costs to maintain that fear, and I know what we might gain by choosing differently." From the Nexari section, Elder Voss spoke with the weight of ancient authority. "Sentinel Nixavi, you abandoned your mission and betrayed your people's trust. Why should we believe your words carry any value now?" "Because of what her betrayal created," Marcus said, speaking for the first time since entering the chamber. His voice was steady, professional, but those who knew him could hear the underlying current of complicated emotions. He gestured toward Kale, then toward the holographic displays showing hybrid families across the galaxy. 20 years ago, I thought love between our species was impossible. I thought Xena's feelings were part of an elaborate deception designed to exploit human weakness." His eyes met Xena's across the chamber, and she saw forgiveness there, not complete, not without reservation, but real nonetheless. "I was wrong about many things," Marcus continued, "but I wasn't wrong about the strength of what we created together. Our son has spent his life building bridges between worlds that both our governments insisted were enemies. He's prevented conflicts, saved lives, and proven that cooperation between our species isn't just possible, it's transformative." Kale stepped forward, activating a holographic display that showed the extent of the Confluence Network. 57 worlds now host mixed populations, hybrid children, mixed marriages, joint research projects, shared colonies, all existing in secret because both our governments refused to acknowledge what was growing between us. The display shifted to show agricultural yields, technological advances, and conflict resolution statistics from integrated communities.